विश्वास दिलाता हूं कि देश सुरक्षित हाथों में है।
In the early hours of dawn this morning, as Indian fighter jets struck at a terror base inside Pakistan, a new security paradigm may have been scripted in the skies, in which India's caution of old, exercised after Kargil, after 26/11, has been abandoned, or perhaps no longer possible. Today we witnessed for the first time the declared use of airstrikes inside Pakistan since 1971. The first time airstrikes against terrorist camps. The needle has moved, and it may, many believe, never be the same again. That and more in our next 1 hour. First, the big headlines from India's pre-dawn strikes. So, dawn strikes at a Jaish-e-Mohammed terror camp inside Pakistan. India claims 300 terrorists killed, including key aides of Masood Azhar. The Prime Minister says the country is in safe hands at an election rally shortly after the strikes. Sushma Swaraj, briefing opposition leader, says the fight is not with Pakistan but with terror. And Pakistan says we have the right to reply. All right, so over the next 1 hour, we will dissect the anatomy of the strikes, and we will look at what some are calling now the Balakot paradigm, because that's the place which India has struck inside Pakistan. Let me just go straight across. We have a packed panel and I don't want to waste anyone's time introducing all of them, but let me just go straight across first to Lieutenant General D.S. Huda, who of course is a war hero and someone who was overseeing our first surgical strikes immediately in the aftermath of Uri. He joins us from Chandigarh. Thank you very much indeed, sir, for joining us. Now, General Huda, you've overseen surgical strikes of a more conventional nature, where our soldiers went on ground, but now we almost seem to have witnessed aerial surgical strikes, sir, for the first time.
That's right, and frankly, if you ask me, it was the need of the hour. After the first surgical strike, we did see little change in Pakistan's behavior. They carried on as if it's business as usual. So I think there was an essential requirement for India to up the ante. People say using Air Force is an escalation, but I think it was an escalatory ladder that we had to climb if we are serious about telling Pakistan that, this much and no more.
Right. And you think that strikes like these, while it involved an escalation, you think that in the end it's worth it because of the kind of signal it sends?
Absolutely, it's worth it. How long can India, sort of sit back and accept terror strikes happening into our territory? We pride ourselves as a growing nation. We aspire for regional and global leadership. We can't be seen as a country, which quietly accepts anything which is coming from across Pakistan. Terror attacks are regularly happening. The border is hot. So therefore, if I think it just signals a new and confident India that's willing to take the bull by its horns.
Right. And General Huda, this seems to have been quite a remarkable operation, because for our jets to go all the way in, carry out a strike in, this is not in POK, this is, as we understand it, in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, so this is in Pakistan proper, and come back without a scratch is quite a feat.
It's an amazing operation. The India-Pakistan border is considered one of the most heavily guarded borders in the world. And as far as Pakistan is concerned, is completely concentrating, on this border. Their air defense networks, their radars, they've got airfields which are very close to the international border and line of control. So for the Air Force, to go in such an environment, carry out an attack, as you said, not only in POK but across in Pakistan. Balakot is in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and to be able to return safely, it's a classic, amazing professional operation. I mean, hats off, to the Air Force that planned it and the pilots who executed it.
Now, General, as always, Pakistan has come out with it's actually been a day of a fairly confusing set of responses from Pakistan, from first denial to anger to then saying that, they're going to now take this up with the international community. But I just want to focus on the first part where, and we've seen this pattern before, Pakistan says that India has completely exaggerated these attacks. There's been no such terror camp or any sort of infrastructure that has been destroyed. Nobody has been killed. A couple of houses damaged. There's been an injury. How do we process this?
I think this is more for their own domestic consumption because they've kept the army on a very high pedestal, and its only sort of role is to defend Pakistan from the Indian defense forces. Nothing new in this. We saw this after the 2016 strikes also, where they completely denied anything has happened. They took international reporters all over close to the IB, and this is exactly the same thing that they're doing now. That nothing has happened, everything is all right. They have come in. I mean, since the strike had been done so deep, I think they couldn't completely deny it. So they've taken the next best option, which is there has been no damage to us.
Right. Now, of course, we've had some visuals, images released from the Indian side of essentially this target as it was hit before the strike. These are, I suspect, historic pictures of this particular Jaish-e-Mohammed terrorist camp. We'll just play those visuals on the screen. But of course, the question at some point, General, will come up about evidence from our side as well to suggest that these strikes were carried out. We did manage to inflict the damages that we've claimed. How important does that become as a factor?
So to me, it's frankly not very important because similar questions were also raised after the surgical strike. I think what is key here is one, our intent and resolve,
right,
and secondly that we will go across and hit targets, and we will hit terror camps which are in Pakistan. I think to me whether it's 500 or 200 or 300 casualties is really immaterial. I think it's a demonstration of Indian resolve, that's going to put whatever pressure on Pakistan, and surely not, how many terrorists have got killed.
Right. Before I let you go, I do want to ask you, though, that with each of these strikes, with the Uri strike and now with this strike, though, the question always comes is, what have we achieved? With the Uri strike, it seemed more like it was just a case of settling that score of what happened in Uri. Now, and so, but then we had Pulwama, and now we've hit them again. What do you think this is going to lead to, realistically?
I think we've learned, or we should have learned our lessons. After Uri, that we did do a strike, and let me tell you, after the strike, we could see that the Pakistan army was under tremendous pressure. I think for some time we need to make sure that the pressure is not eased. And I'm not saying you only have to exercise the military option, the diplomatic option, the economic option, the international isolation, and where required, a military option. If certain amount of continuous pressure is put on Pakistan, then maybe we can hope to see, some change in behavior. But if you are, going to celebrate this one strike and say, that's it, then we'll probably have something similar to what we saw after Uri. So I'm sure, the government has a strategy now which they're going to follow. We are seeing, for example, much greater diplomatic pressure, etc., coming on Pakistan than we saw after the Uri strikes.
Right.
So let's see, how it goes from here. But I'm hoping that there will be a series of sort of actions which will make Pakistan rethink, maybe deter it in some ways. Let's not hope for very, very early solutions. Honestly, it's a country which has been practicing this since independence.
Sure.
But I think some continuous pressure is required.
Okay, no, those are, as always, very, very sage counsel from you, that don't treat this as a one-off, don't make a big deal about it like we did with Uri, but be sustained in your approach. But then I must ask you, very, very, the final question to you, that you're saying that we should keep the screws on Pakistan, we should continue to intensify our pressure on Pakistan. But what about Pakistan? Because, already we've seen in just these past 12 hours, the mood there has, there's now a considerable amount of public pressure on the government there. What do you think that they could do?
Look, I think there are no easy choices before the Pakistan Prime Minister. He knows the state of the country, internally, politically, also, the kind of international condemnation, that he is facing. Also the fact that any escalation that he wishes to do,
yes,
he's contending with a much stronger conventional military force.
Right.
And so therefore, I'm not sure, I'm not saying there can't be a limited action by him to please his own sort of audience, or for the Pakistan army to say, look, we've retaliated. I don't see it sort of, escalating into a full-blown war. Mm-hmm. Therefore, statements is one thing, putting your money where your mouth is different. I don't see any easy choices for Imran Khan, that he's going to now suddenly escalate and, this thing is going to spiral out of control.
Right, okay. No easy choices for Pakistan, but also for India to remain resolute. Thank you very much indeed, General, for joining us. Okay, let's now open it up. We have a fantastic panel here on the show tonight. We have Nirupama Rao joining us, former Foreign Secretary. Abhishek Manu Singhvi, Rajya Sabha MP of the Congress, is with us. Lalita Kumar Mangalam, Director, India Foundation, Senior Member of the BJP, is here. We have Dhruva Jaishankar, Fellow Foreign Policy, Brookings, India. Jaidev Ranade, former RAW Additional Secretary in the Cabinet Secretariat. Colonel V.N. Thapar is here with us on the show as well. So it's a very, very full house indeed. Ma'am, if I can just start with you, Nirupama Rao, that just taking up from that last point that we were just talking to General Huda about where we stand now with Pakistan and what really are Imran Khan's options in your view?
Well, to my mind, I don't believe that Pakistan has a big menu of options. It's obviously on the defensive, although it may proclaim offense and intention to wreak vengeance for what has happened. But I don't believe the space available for Pakistan is very much. And as far as the world community is concerned,
yes,
there is, I believe, a depth of understanding of where India stands on this issue and our very real need to fight terrorism resolutely and determinedly. And we have taken, I believe, a step in that direction today with the airstrikes that you saw. So India, I believe, has taken a right step. Public opinion in this country demanded this, and more than that, I think the protection and the defense of our national security and in many ways common sense also, I think, demanded the action that we took. And it's not as if preemptive strikes of this sort are being seen for the first time. India is not the only or the first country to have practiced it. I think we've seen that from the United States. We saw that in the past. And international law as well as customary law also have a space, have a place, have a provision for this.
Right. But would you say, ma'am, at the same time that, I mean, other countries may have practiced it in the past, but we've done it for the first time. After this, after Balakot, the needle has shifted significantly. We can't go back to where we were earlier.
Well, I think that, yes, in a sense, a Rubicon has been crossed. I think the struggle ahead is going to be complex. Most of all, we cannot afford triumphalism.
Right.
We must understand that the challenges are great. We are confronted with an obdurate and almost obsessed adversary when it comes to India. I think we have been prepared for that for many decades now, but I think in many senses we are now going to confront a difficult situation, but India as a big country, as a emerging power, as a recognized power on the global stage,
Right.
should be prepared to take those steps. And there's going to be, I'm sure, whole-scale support within the country for this. We are going to, as I said, it's a challenging situation, and as far as our own domestic and internal security needs are concerned, we obviously cannot afford any lapses or any mistakes on that front. But yes, we must face this situation with determination and unitedly.
And unitedly. That's important because Lalita Kumaramangalam, I mean, to that extent, the government has handled this with great maturity. We've seen that they've taken on board all the opposition parties. Sushma Swaraj had a briefing, took them on board, and everyone seems to be, at least at the moment, politically very much united.
Yes. First, I'd like to pay my tributes to our boys who died at Pulwama and then congratulate the Air Force for what they've done.
Right.
It's not a question of revenge, as Nirupama ji pointed out. It's a question that we have suffered too much already at the hands of these terrorists. India has, the government has declared quite frankly, we have nothing against Pakistan or Pakistanis. What we did was hit at a base where the terrorists were training people, Fidains, that is the ones who, suicide squads.
Sure.
And I don't think there's anything wrong in it. Yes, it's the first time airstrikes have been carried out against Pakistan after 71, etc. But it's about time, I think, that we did it, because we have seen an escalation over the years.
Right.
And I think for too far we have presented to, let's say, turn the other cheek. And I think the general opinion in India.
When have we turned the other cheek? Because it's not as if India has always held back. I mean, in 1971 we didn't hold back.
1971 is a long, long time ago, and we didn't hold back, I agree. And I think it was quite right that we didn't hold back.
Right.
Now, this is not about Congress versus BJP or who's in power, who's not in power. This is about the country.
Okay.
And too many of us have died at the hands of these terrorists.
Right.
So, I think, as you pointed out, that the government is, or rather the Air Force, the Defence, Army, everybody, and the Air Force have carried out a very calibrated attack.
Right.
They've used, they've obviously had extremely good information. Ground ops have been really good. They have done a very targeted thing, and remember that it was done in such a way, despite Pakistan which is supposed to have been on high alert.
Yes, that's right. They managed to go in and come out.
They managed to go in pretty far.
No, that was quite
and
remarkable.
Come out
if I can
absolutely safe.
Okay.
Now, it's a good thing that all parties are on board. Yes, there are some noises of dissonance, but that's bound to be there. And
sure. At the moment, though, we've not heard too many noises of dissonance.
Hardly any, yes,
Abhishek,
I agree.
Right. Abhishek Singhvi, you know, it is, of course, important at this time to see visibly demonstrable political unity, and we've seen that actually, you know, across the political spectrum, whether it's the Congress party and others have all come out very much in support of these strikes.
Srinivasan, there is but no question. I think that's a given, and I don't even think it should be thought about any other way. But I just want to make 3 or 4 points. One is that, of course, one must start by congratulating our armed forces, and one must congratulate the decisiveness, the speed. But I think it's very important, picking up from where we left off from the earlier speakers, is to keep a consistency. One of the problems is the zigzag in policy. I can tell you that whatever the government adopts today, be it path X, path Y or path Z, let them declare it internally, quietly, confidentially, let's say for the next 3 months, 6 months. Every party, certainly the Congress for which I speak, will resolutely support it. But the caveat is the government should not waver from that path. Zigzags send a wrong policy.
What
there
sort
should
of
be
zigzags?
kutti with Pakistan, reading. No, it's happened before, and this is not the time to speak about it. I'm talking of foreign policy.
Right.
It doesn't mean that, you start with calling them and then you talk to them in Bangkok and then you do kutti with them and then you go for a lunch and all that. You decide. We will support you fully. If there is a most favored nation status gone,
Sure.
it should be consistently applied.
Okay.
If there is a diplomatic blitzkrieg to shame and name Pakistan, follow it consistently for 6 months. That's one. Second,
Yes.
Pakistan is again following the policy which some of its leaders followed at partition time. They are trying to religize it. They're trying to make a religious division. You heard the statements of Pakistan people about the organization of Islamic countries.
Right.
I think we should carry the fight right back home there and try and stick ourselves there and show that our presence there shows that these religious boundaries are transcended.
Right.
We are one of the largest Muslim nations as well, and our attendance there, because Mr. Qureshi's entire statement today is intended to drive a religious wedge.
Right.
Third, and very important, I think another way to carry the fight home right there today is to call for a naming of Azhar right now in the United Nations.
Okay.
This is a very good opportune moment. At least 4 of those 5 countries are with us.
Yes.
And even if China is to veto it yet again,
Right.
China will be shamed. It's well worth a try. All the other 4 nations are now going to be much more with us on this. And last
Well,
but not the least,
yes.
I think it's important to be ready for a short term for very hostile conditions, because Pakistan's only trump card over us
Yes.
is the ability to wage a asymmetric war.
Right.
That asymmetry needs us to be on our guard. They cannot match us otherwise, but they will do guerrilla tactics, they will do terrorism tactics,
Right.
and we have to hold ourselves and then retaliate with appropriate force.
Okay.
And I would say lastly
Yes.
that the consistency of pressure on Pakistan
Yeah.
should, I say it carefully, include continuing military pressure.
Okay. Continuing
Not only
military pressure.
diplomatic, economic, etc.
Right, right. Well, already we are seeing we're seeing ceasefire violations, which is basically Pakistan, shelling across the LOC, and that's flared up once again. And we'll have to, of course, keep a close eye on that. But Dhruva Jaishankar, let me just ask you about the whole idea of the shift that we've heard about since the morning. And there is now a considerable amount of documentation of previous instances where India was contemplating going into Pakistan and striking, but pulled back. I'll just put up 2 quick quotes on the screen. One was, of course, this was immediately in the aftermath of Kargil, where and General V.P. Malik has written about this, that he said it required a lot of convincing from the then Prime Minister Vajpayee to make me let them, that is Pakistan, go. I was unhappy and so were the soldiers. Amongst the reasons was pressure from international community and, of course, elections. And then the second time was, of course, after 26/11, which Shiv Shankar Menon has chronicled in his book, where he said that he urged both Pranab Mukherjee and Prime Minister Manmohan Singh to retaliate. His preference was for action. Mukherjee, he said, seemed to agree with me, but ultimately they concluded more was to be gained from not attacking than from attacking. And he said, with a different mix of people at the helm, India may have chosen differently. But now, that restraint, or at least that political consensus on that restraint, seems to have been abandoned.
And it goes back earlier as well. In the early 1980s, there was serious contemplation in 1981, again in 1984, to attack the Kahuta reactor, the nuclear reactor that Ikyu Khan had set up. In fact, the Indian Air Force in 1981 drew up plans for that and decided that felt that they would take too many casualties in undergoing a successful strike. But India's found itself effectively playing by Pakistan's rules, which means that we have sustained attacks all over the country by Pakistan-based terrorism, and the feeling was India could only retaliate in POK at the very least, or across the LOC. And I think this has shifted, which is showing that India in some ways is going to start dictating the rules, and not just playing by Pakistan's rules. So I think that is a very important shift.
Right.
The other thing was there was a feeling that surgical strikes by air would be messy, and several people have written about this both before and after 26/11.
Right.
And I think we have now tested that too. The fact again that even the Pakistanis don't say that there was a downing of an aircraft. So again, 2 sort of maybe we can, I don't know if it's fair to call them myths, but 2 at least self-imposed restraints seem to have now been tested in that respect.
Okay, so 2 myths have been tested, but just very quick comments from both of you, because I'm told that we have to slip into a break. In terms of now, what do you think is going to be Pakistan's response? I'll come to that in a second, but I first want to ask you also about the significance of targeting this particular camp in Balakot, because we used to keep hearing that the real headquarters of the Jaish is in Bahawalpur, which is of course in the Punjab province. This was another center which we heard less about, but from all the information we're getting today, seems to be pretty important.
Well, Bahawalpur is the headquarters of the Jaish-e-Mohammed. The Balakot camp is where they were carrying out the training. It's one of the major training camps.
Right.
And there was specific information that 350 people were being trained there for carrying out suicide attacks.
Right.
Not in Kashmir alone, but elsewhere in India also. And I think that is what prompted this preemptive strike. I would just mention that the choice of an airstrike was also really to keep it clean, because it were precision strikes on that target.
Right.
And I think by ensuring that there were no military, economic or civilian targets which were hit.
Right.
And I think that is what is making it difficult for Pakistan to respond, because they have to look now as to how to hit back at us and what to do.
Right.
So I think it was, there was a reference earlier to an escalatory ladder. I think it was a deliberate choice to see that there is no escalation by keeping it targeted only in this way.
Right.
So I think it was a very deliberate move, and it seems to have worked out very well.
Okay.
And outstanding job by the Air Force, sir.
Right, right. In fact, we're going to just look closely at Pakistan's shifting positions. We have 3 different positions they've taken in the past 8 hours, and what the specific hard options before them are. We'll do that in a moment from now. Take a short break. Back with much more. Welcome back. I just want to go across to you, Colonel Thapar, and then I'm going to go across to Nirupama Rao. But Colonel Thapar, in terms of now, if you just looked at Pakistan's shifting rhetoric, and we can just put that graphic up on the screen. So first we had Colonel Major General Asif Ghafoor, who's the spokesperson, saying Indian aircraft was forced to withdraw, released payload in haste. Then we had Shah Mahmood Qureshi saying this was an act of aggression and we reserve the right to retaliate. And then, of course, you have the Pakistan Prime Minister's office rejecting the Indian claim and saying this was self-serving, reckless and fictitious.
All right.
So
I look at it that this is the first time they have not been able to deny.
Right.
And instead of deniability, they have taken on face saving. It's nothing but face saving.
But they're rejecting the claim in a sense. They're saying it's fictitious. So there's a sort of a denial.
Yeah. I mean, there is so much pressure from the local population.
Right.
That Twitter is full of tweets asking them to explain how this happened.
Right.
Really, correctly so, because we have done an extremely good and professional, high-grade operation.
Right.
Just look at it this way.
Yeah.
The entire mobilization has taken place in Pakistan.
Yes.
The CAP, by CAP I mean the combat air patrols are flying.
Right.
All the radars are deployed.
Right.
They are in operational readiness.
They're fully alert. And yet we go in and
yet
manage
we have
to
gone
strike.
and hit the target very effectively.
And in 12 days. In 12 days since Pulwama.
And
so, Nirupama Rao, I just want to ask you that, because now Pakistan is saying that, look, we're going to now take the international media, we're going to take our domestic media to go and visit this purported site where the attack took place, to basically show the world that nothing happened. Now, how does this play out, and how should India respond to all of that when all of that starts?
I think you can expect a very choreographed reaction from Pakistan, and it very much typifies their patterns of behavior when you look at the past also. So one should be prepared for that, but at the same time, simultaneously, I think it enjoins upon us to also be able to educate international opinion very powerfully and very convincingly and persuasively about why we have launched these actions and what is the basis for our anger and our differences with Pakistan.
Right.
The cause being terrorism. I think we have to do our job also. I don't believe the Pakistanis have much or even any credibility left on this issue. So they will go through this kind of choreographed sequence in which they will take people to the site and ostensibly try and prove that, quote unquote, nothing happened. But I think we should be able to take that in our stride, because I think that in our own quiver of arrows, as it were, we have much more persuasive arguments and very convincing arguments based on the truth, really.
Right. In fact, today, the foreign ministry briefed the diplomats, and that the sort of the diplomatic community seemed largely satisfied with the briefing. In fact, they were praising India for a very swift transfer of information to the foreign diplomatic community. Abhishek Singhvi, yes, you wanted to come in.
Srinivasan, 2 or 3 points. One is that the diplomatic offensive, the diplomatic blitzkrieg, I would call it, is extremely important. I've heard today Australia and England, UK, but that list of countries overtly speaking positively must be multiplied rapidly, and I have no doubt it will happen. Secondly, let's be blunt. I have no doubt, and there is no hurry for it, but in a very careful, calibrated, sober manner over the next few days. Look, the government of India would have ample evidence to embarrass Pakistan otherwise also. Nowadays, you are talking about this, this funny, laughable thing about this Asif Ghafoor's program. In fact, I saw saying that I've got a plane waiting to take you, but we can't take you because of weather. There's nothing there. There's just not a single brick, not a single body.
Yes.
Well, there are eyes in the skies nowadays. And there are eyes in the skies by lots of people who are generally our allies on this, including the US. Plus, I have no doubt that these sophisticated planes themselves have eyes. Eventually, we must make a dossier complete.
Yes.
Starting with the way these terror camps at Balakot were functioning.
Right.
And how they were destroyed. And let me tell you, I have no doubt surgical strikes have happened 5 times in the past, although not a cross-border airstrike.
Right.
And the evidence for that must be with the government of India, and that must be shared over time to embarrass Pakistan globally.
Okay. In fact, when you mentioned
the dossier, should be focused on the anti-terror operation.
Right. When you mentioned the dossier, so
not an anti-Pakistan operation, not an anti-civilian.
Right. Yeah. So when you mentioned dossier, the pre-strike dossier was actually shared with the media, and those pictures are what you saw on screen, which give you a fairly detailed walkthrough of this particular camp. But on the point, Lalita Kumaramanglam. Yes, sir. You want to come? Yes.
I want to say that as yet the videos of the fighters that took part and the gun cameras is yet to be released.
Right.
The moment that is released, all this Chak Shubha will be over.
That is the one.
Now, I just want to ask you on the point that Nirupama Rao is making, that that while we should definitely celebrate the bravery of our Air Force, that we should try to stay away from triumphalism.
I agree. We shouldn't get too cocky. I don't think we're going to make that mistake.
Right. But, I just want to play a clip of the Prime Minister, because almost immediately after the strikes this afternoon, there was a sort of a rally, a political rally, pre-scheduled in Rajasthan, in Churu, which was in a sense the first occasion that he had a chance to address the public in the aftermath of these particular attacks. And I just want to play a clip from that and then get you to react to that. So let's just listen in. This is the Prime Minister right at the start of the rally.
मैं देशवासियों को विश्वास दिलाता हूं कि देश सुरक्षित हाथों में है। और चुरू की धरती से मैं देशवासियों को फिर से एक बार 2014 के मेरे इन शब्दों को मां भारती के वीरों को नमन करते हुए आज मैं फिर से दोहरा रहा हूं। सौगंध मुझे इस मिट्टी की, सौगंध मुझे इस मिट्टी की, मैं देश नहीं मिटने दूंगा। मैं देश नहीं रुकने दूंगा। मैं देश नहीं झुकने दूंगा। सौगंध मुझे है मिट्टी की, मैं देश नहीं मिटने दूंगा।
Now, Lalita Kumar Mangalam, when the Prime Minister says that, and if you saw in the background, there were photographs of all the martyrs of Pulwama at an election rally, and now we're heading into election season. How are we to understand this? I mean, is this now going to become an election issue, and this is going to be now used as a part of the political campaign, and does that then become problematic?
Vasu, I don't think it's going to become a part of the election campaign. But you must remember that as Dov pointed out before he left, all these years India seemed to have been playing Pakistan's tune. There has been a shift which has been very clearly signalled.
But that becomes a political point then, and the idea I thought was to not to, if you either rise above politics and say that, you know, this is just about India, this is about foreign policy, about government, or it's Congress, or then versus BJP.
The people of India also have very strong feelings against Pakistan. Just, I mean, let me digress a bit and say every Pakistan-India cricket match, what a frenzy it creates.
Okay.
Right. So, when we've had something as recently as a huge number of our boys who were just travelling, blown up to bits, right, the country has wanted some sort of justice. Now, obviously, a Prime Minister is going to have to reassure his countrymen that, look, we are safe. Whatever may be being said about India bowing down, turning the other cheek,
but from a rally, from an election rally with the martyrs, the picture of the martyrs in the background, I mean, that is surely then politicizing their deaths.
We are an emotional people. We are an emotional people. We need emotional reassurance apart from all the other tactics that we use, which is economic, which is foreign policy, which is military, etc.
Well,
he is the Prime Minister.
I just wanted to point out that you actually
to reassure them.
Well, I just wanted to point out to you that the Prime Minister.
Dramatic. I agree. The words used were a bit dramatic, but the basic message that he was giving is that we are not going to keep quiet, and we will defend our country to the best of our ability, and that we have the ability to defend it.
The Prime Minister, Lalita Kumar Mangalam, the Prime Minister has every right to address the nation. It was the BJP itself which said, we will not politicize Pulwama. We will not use it for political capital. So
I don't think he politicized it. He just said that we are in safe hands. Well, he could well have been meaning that
the pictures of the martyrs
on well is not saying that the Air Force has also paid, you know, has showed Pakistan that you cannot play around with the life of our Jawans.
Okay, Abhishek
which is
Singhvi,
probably what he did mean.
Okay, Abhishek Singhvi, is that you think that that's okay?
Srinivasan,
yes.
This is not the time in any manner to play politics. He is our Prime Minister. This is our country, and the country is solidly behind the armed forces and the government, which is the civilian control of the armed forces.
Right.
I must, however, say, in terms of studied moderation, that I hope this is not repeated, this model. Secondly, of course, it was not the Prime Minister. Remember, he was in his role as the leader of a BJP addressing a political rally organized by the BJP.
He still is the Prime Minister.
He was not addressing the nation. And thirdly, I don't think, you see, the problem is that this is replicated and duplicated, then a rally will have to politically, after 1 week, 2 weeks, have a reply by another rally of some other party. Now, if every party starts putting the Pulwama heroes in the backdrop on photographs, that is really drawing into a vortex of politics which is completely unnecessary.
Right.
We stand, each one of us, with those Pulwama heroes. We stand with our Prime Minister, and he has no need in the ensuing weeks to bring this onto the stage of a rally, a political rally. Yes, he is entitled to announce measures, he is entitled to address the nation, he is entitled to be part of an all-party meeting, he is entitled to, in fact, should take us all into confidence, but actually over time to invite reactions from other political parties for rallies will demean actually and devalue the very values which he is trying to uphold.
Okay.
And it is axiomatic that no Prime Minister is supposed to allow our nation to diminish or mitna ya jhukna.
Okay. Okay.
It is axiomatic.
So fair enough. Fair enough. So I want to move on from this, but I just want to get you to respond saying no. So is it now fair to assume that he may have done it on this occasion, but this is not a model that will now be repeated in rally after rally?
It depends on how you're looking at it, Vasu.
Well, I hope so.
I don't think he meant it as a political move. The political move, if you want to put it that way, was the airstrikes. That's what has spoken loudest. He is a prime minister regardless of which party he may be representing. Obviously, he's not the president of the party, but he is the topmost leader of the party today.
Okay,
but
that's
he
an
is also the
interesting
prime
inversion
minister.
of logic. You're saying
And
the airstrikes was politics,
to,
and this is not politics.
No,
Some would say it's the reverse.
The entire thing is part of the political spectrum. We have shown that there is a difference, or there is a change in the political response of the government.
Okay.
Now, if the prime minister, after these strikes have taken place, is addressing, whether he calls it a rally or whatever he wants to call it, he's addressing the people of India who needed reassurance also. There's been a huge cry from all Indians throughout the country, from all parties, everybody. As Abhishek ji puts it, it's not politics. It's Indians wanted, a befitting reply given to these horrible, terrible terrorists who've been making our lives miserable, killing our people, without any sort of remorse.
Sure.
And as Prime Minister of the country, he spoke to his people.
Okay, all right. We also are joined by Michael Kugelman, who's the Deputy Director and Senior Associate for the South Asia Program, joining us from Washington, D.C. Thank you very much, Michael, for joining us. Now, give us a sense of how the world, and particularly America, is viewing this, because in the run-up to these strikes, we did hear a fair amount from the American government that, and in fact, Donald Trump, in his typically sort of candid way, said that we are deeply involved with trying to de-escalate all of this. But now that these strikes have happened, how exactly does America see this, and what sort of role do they envision for themselves in this dynamic?
Well, I think that the United States has a real balancing act here, that it clearly supports India's right to self-defense, and I imagine that quietly the U.S. government has supported what India has done today. But at the same time, clearly the U.S. does not have any type of interest in a broader escalation, much less a war or conflict between India and Pakistan. I think that's very clear. And, as you know, the U.S. is very busy right now trying to negotiate an end to the war in Afghanistan. Right at this moment, you have top U.S. officials in Afghanistan, in Qatar, negotiating with Taliban to try to launch a peace process. So the last thing the United States would want at this point is to have another war between India and Pakistan. I think that the Trump administration, if you look at the past, there is a record of U.S. governments trying to play the role of crisis manager when things get really bad between India and Pakistan. We certainly saw this during the Kargil crisis in terms of what Bill Clinton did. But this administration is very different, and I just don't know if this is the type of presidential administration that would have the ability, the desire, the capacity to try to play the role of crisis manager. Who would you send out there to do it? I really don't know. So bottom line is the U.S., I think, supports what India has done, but it definitely does not have any interest in any type of escalation.
Right. So you're saying that they're not interested in any type of escalation, Michael, but of course the big question here in India, and I'm sure across the border as well, is what is Pakistan going to do? So are you saying, in a sense, that given this particular phase the U.S. is in this sort of non-interventionist phase with other stuff happening in the region, that they're not likely to be, even if they don't send an envoy, they're not likely to be working the phones to try and get Pakistan to de-escalate?
Well, no, I do think that the U.S. will play an effort behind the scenes. I imagine there already have been conversations between top U.S. officials and their interlocutors in India and in Pakistan. But in terms of having some type of shuttle diplomacy set up or something like that, I just don't know. But certainly, the way things are right now at this very point, I don't see the Trump administration with the desire to try to get involved. But if things do escalate, depending on how Pakistan responds, if it responds, if you have troop buildups along the border, then I think the U.S. may get more concerned and want to do something. But I just worry about who within this administration would have the ability to serve in that role. I just don't know who could do that. That's the big question for me.
Right. That's a good point. But I just want to ask each of you, actually, starting with you, Mr. Ranade, about, we've not had a chance to talk specifically about what Pakistan could do. Apart from ramping up the ceasefire violations and so on, what really are their hard options? Because we went in and we struck a terror camp. We didn't strike civilians. We didn't strike any military targets. They don't have that option. So So, you know, short of coming in and trying to replicate that, you know, in the Indian context, what could they do?
Well, we didn't target economic centers either.
Yes.
So they really have, and we don't have terror camps here. So
exactly.
I don't know. I mean, what are they going to do? Apart from shelling across the LAC, or that will be, you know, something that is an instant reaction,
which they've done in the past,
or trying to activate the sleeper cells which are here, which will be a source of concern for us. But I'm sure we've already started, you know, taking whatever preventive measures we can.
But airstrikes?
Airstrikes, well, it depends on how rational they are. I think you know, you asked Dan Kugelman a question about what the US is trying to do. Michael, I think they will be trying to tell Pakistan to exercise restraint, much as Beijing has told Pakistan to try and exercise restraint, or to exercise restraint.
No, and we hope they do.
Well,
but if it escalates, if there's too much domestic pressure, you're saying airstrikes would be an extreme option, because that would then lead to
particularly because we have tried to ensure that there is no escalation. That is why we chose this option. That's what you know. Otherwise, then we could have done something else.
Whenever the air power is exercised, escalation is inbuilt. It is bound to happen. Escalation is bound to happen.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
You're saying Pakistan will have to
no, if they use air against us now, it is bound to escalate, you know. So that is one point I want to make.
But we've already, by that same logic, we've also used air power, so they then could turn around and say that escalation is merited.
Yeah, so when we have done this particular action, we have taken this fully into consideration and then taken this step.
But then answer the question then. I mean, these are hard choices that Imran Khan is probably sitting with his advisors and trying to figure out. What could he do? Could he actually consider airstrikes, or is that going to be too far?
No. It is. If we take what you're saying, that attitude, we may be hit somewhere. So we have to take that option is open to Imran,
right?
And he may well exercise it. And therefore, what are we supposed to do?
If that happens, if that were to happen, let's hope it doesn't. But if that were to happen, what should we do?
We'll be prepared for it.
There'll be a retaliation.
I mean,
there'll be a retaliation.
There'll be. I mean, and the other thing that I want to tell you is that this has been a tremendous action. This particular strike.
Yes.
Unusually a very good action. Many people have tried to compare it with Abbottabad and this particular. I would just like to put in that in Abbottabad there was always a doubt that elements of Pakistan were in league with the Americans to execute that.
That's right. That they handed Bin Laden over to the Americans, but they made it seem like it was
whereas we have done it on our own strength, and also the shackles that were there with the in using the air power that have been broken for all times to come.
Right. So and that's the shift in the needle which I mentioned at the beginning, Lalita Kumar, about Pakistan. No, but about this idea of a response.
Yeah.
Again, hoping there is no response.
It doesn't happen. Yes.
None of us want war.
Yes.
But if it were to come, what then? I mean, then as we've just heard, you know, Jaidev Ranade say, would India then have to retaliate to the retaliation?
Look, let's hope that it doesn't happen. If it does, I'm sure, as the General said, that India is prepared. But the fact is that in the meantime, we also have to keep up the economic and the international pressure on them.
Right.
We've already announced 200% duty on their goods, etc. We have to squeeze them in many ways. Remember that Imran himself has very limited economic options. Pakistan is not really doing well economically, and China, who's now currently their main financial partner, has said that both Pakistan and India must exercise restraint. Which means he can't do it alone. This is not going to be. It can't be a standalone decision by just Imran and his generals. He will have to be. He has no choice but to listen to. You know, a few other people from other countries, etc. So I think his options are limited. He will try to save face, of course.
But the options are limited. All right, Abhishek Singhvi, yes.
Vasu, I have a slightly different view on this. I think, firstly, I agree with you that Pakistan's options are relatively limited because they fall more in the area of conventional war as far as targets are concerned. Therefore, they may do some things, including for shelling is the easiest, maybe a few strikes here and there, but I don't think they will do that in all probability, or even be very serious about it. What I think is,
Yes.
and this is where we have to be very careful, it hurts us more also, that they will escalate not only the Jaish cells, but a series of other non-state actor cells to inflict guerrilla damage on us. Now that can be expanded in many ways to our institutions,
Let's hope not. Yeah.
to our important figures, and that is where they have an asymmetric element of advantage and superiority over us.
Right, okay.
And that is where India has to be really, really resolute, strong and planned.
Okay, well, let's hope it doesn't come to that, but certainly this is a moment of tension, and we are, of course, going to closely watch and wait to see what happens next. But we're completely out of time. Thank you all so much for joining us, but don't go away, because just on the other side of the break, Vishnu Shom is going to be back, and he's going to take us through the inside story of this attack. But before we go, let's just play for you the voices of the families of those who were killed in Pulwama. And we'll end with one of those voices, one of the relatives of those who were killed in Pulwama, and their response when they heard the news of these airstrikes. From all of us here, goodbye.
जो मेरा पति का विस्फोट किया, उसका बदला लिया, हम बहुत खुश हैं, गर्व भी हैं। जिस प्रकार हम लोग को तड़पाया गया है, उसी प्रकार उन लोग के दिल में भी दुख दर्द का वो लोग भी समझे थोड़ा।
जो मेरे पति शहीद हुए उनका दर्द तो जिंदगी भर ही रहेगा, लेकिन 1-2% दर्द कुछ कम हुआ है।
सेना कमान इसी तरह के स्ट्राइक हमेशा करते रहे। उनके जो वहाँ पर जगह जगह जो कैंप लगा रहे हैं, वो कैंप को ही नष्ट कर दें कि आगे वो कोई वहाँ शिक्षा और ट्रेनिंग दे ही न सकें। न ट्रेनिंग देंगे न आगे टेररिस्ट बढ़ेंगे।